Good morning and welcome to China Now with me, Makiza Latifa, your window into how China works, thinks, and connects with the rest of the world. Let's get started with China Currents with Chris. In this edition, we look at the 26 heads of states attending the September 3rd military parade. Also, we will tell you about a groundbreaking medical milestone as Chinese scientists transplant a gene-edited pig lung into a human. Very interesting. And then the construction of a cutting-edge scientific facility, 700 meters underground, aimed at Nobel-level breakthroughs. And the latest international auto show where 8 luxury brands have pulled out. These and more stories are coming up shortly, so stay tuned.
Welcome to China Currents, your weekly news report on the latest developments in China. In this episode, 27 heads of state attended the September 3rd military parade, and Chinese scientists successfully transplanted a gene-edited pig lung into a human. And China is building a scientific facility 700 meters underground to unravel the mysteries of the universe. At China's latest auto show, luxury foreign cars were conspicuously absent. Hangzhou has included AI classes in its standard school curriculum as part of the nationwide educational push. China Currents is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started. I'm Chris. Now let's start today's China Currents. On September 3rd, Beijing's Tiananmen Square hosted a grand military parade commemorating the 80th anniversary of victory in the Chinese People's War of resistance against Japan and a global fight against fascism. The event showcased China's consistent pursuit of peace, the development of the People's Liberation Army, and its world-class advanced weaponry. The Space Force, Cyberspace Force, and Information Support Force made their debut as new additions to the military. The weapons formations, divided into 8 sections, highlighted the Chinese military's main active equipment. Official Chinese commentary emphasized that the weapons has been modified to meet the demands of modern warfare. Particularly noteworthy were 3 aspects. First, the air defense and missile defense troops displayed a counter-drone combat group, capable of neutralizing and even destroying drones. Second, the parade presented the systematized display of China's unmanned combat groups across land, sea, and air. Third, for the first time, China's triad of land, sea, and air-based strategic nuclear forces was showcased. The official commentary highlighted the DA-5C liquid-fueled intercontinental nuclear strategic missile with a strike range covering the entire globe. One distinctive feature caught people's attention: a hot food support vehicle with cooking stoves. It seems that the Chinese military goes to great lengths to ensure that soldiers can enjoy fresh Chinese cuisine even on the battlefield. During CCTV's live broadcast, close-up shots were given to Putin, Kim Jong-un, former Kuomintang chairwoman Hong Xiuqiu, and respiratory disease expert Zhong Nanshan. Even before the official list of foreign leaders in attendance was released, the event had already drawn global commentary, with many seeing it as the reflection of China's foreign relations. Russian President Vladimir Putin's unusually long visit attracted special notice. From August 31st to September 3rd, he not only watched the parade but also attended the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Tianjin. By contrast, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi only took part in the SCO summit. Analysts suggested that New Delhi sought to cool its engagement with Beijing following a recent thaw in relations. Also drawing attention was the appearance of former Japanese Prime Minister Yukio Hatoyama. The 79-year-old Hatoyama, who once knelt in mourning for victims of the Nanjing massacre and bowed at an anti-Japanese memorial in South Korea, has long been branded a traitor by Japan's right wing. His visit to China this time triggered a backlash at home, with critics even calling for his passport to be revoked. Shen Yi, a renowned Chinese professor of international relations, remarked, "Who respects history and who betrays history? The guest list makes that crystal clear." And Hu Xijin, a prominent commentator and former editor-in-chief of Global Times, said, "When will Japanese leaders attend Asia's largest World War II commemoration at Tiananmen Square with dignity, openly reflecting on the crimes of wartime militarism? Only then will they truly move forward." Next, let's turn to a groundbreaking surgery. Recently, a team of Chinese scientists announced that they had successfully transplanted a pig lung into a 39-year-old male patient who had been declared brain dead with the consent of his family. For 9 days, the transplanted lung remained viable and functional. This was the world's first attempt at transplanting a pig lung into a human. The research was led by Professor He Jianxing's team at the First Affiliated Hospital of Guangzhou Medical University and published in Nature Medicine on August 25th. With global demand for organ transplants far outstripping supply, xenotransplantation, the use of animal organs, has long been considered a potential solution. The Chinese team's achievement marks it a major milestone. The challenges of these surgeries are immense: immune rejection, physiological incompatibility across species, and infection risks. Success requires not only surgical expertise but also genetic modification of donor pigs. Dr. Pan Dengke's group supplied the donor animal. He explained, "The lung is one of the most difficult organs to transplant across species. The pig used in this case was gene-edited to reduce the risk of immune rejection. After transplantation, the lung maintained ventilation and gas exchange for 9 days, with no sign of hyperacute rejection or active infection." The experiment concluded after 9 days following discussion between the doctors and the patient's family. For years, xenotransplantation of pig livers has been called the holy grail of the field. Transplanting a pig lung is even more challenging because the lung directly interacts with substances from the external environment. Constant contact with air makes its immune defenses especially strong, leading to more aggressive rejection and higher risk of organ failure. Globally, dozens of large animal-to-human transplants have been attempted, mainly in China and the United States, involving hearts, kidneys, livers, and now lungs. Earlier this year, Chinese teams also achieved the world's first full liver xenotransplant from a gene-edited pig, as well as the pig kidney transplant into a patient with end-stage renal failure, who had now survived 173 days, one of the only 2 such patients worldwide still alive. Organ shortages remain one of the greatest challenges in the medical field, Professor He noted, and xenotransplantation may offer a real solution. While doctors push the boundary of life-saving medicine, Chinese physicists are peering into the origin of the universe. Last week, after more than a decade of preparation and construction, the Jiangmen Underground Neutrino Observatory, JUNO, in Guangdong Province officially began operation. Neutrinos, known as the ghost particles, are among the most abundant particles in the universe, second only to photons. Yet they are notoriously difficult to detect. No fewer than 4 Nobel Prizes have been awarded to neutrino-related discoveries, underscoring their importance. Scientists know neutrinos come in 3 flavors: electron, muon, and tau. JUNO's mission is to determine their mass hierarchy, an extraordinarily delicate measurement. To achieve this, JUNO was built 700 meters underground, shielding it from the constant bombardment of cosmic rays. Think of it as turning off city lights in order to see faint starlight. Its core detector is the 35.4-meter acrylic sphere holding 20,000 tons of liquid scintillator, surrounded by a 41.1-meter stainless steel support frame fitted with 45,000 photomultiplier tubes. Together, these instruments capture the faint traces of passing neutrinos and amplify their signals. First proposed in 2008 and under construction since 2015, JUNO is a major international collaboration. Nearly 700 researchers from 74 institutions and 17 countries will participate. Its results may shed light on solar nuclear reactions, nearby supernovae, nuclear reactor monitoring, and even the Earth's internal structure. Now let's shift gears to China auto market. On August 29th to September 7th, Chengdu, the hub of southwest China, hosted the 28th Chengdu Motor Show. Compared with last year, the absence of imported luxury brands has become more pronounced, with 8 major names missing from the lineup this year. As one of China's 4 premier auto shows, the Chengdu event gathered around 120 brands, spanning passenger cars, modified vehicles, humanoid robots, and the latest trends in EV technologies such as batteries, motors, and electronic control systems. The exhibition covered 220,000 square meters and featured over 1,600 vehicles. But the luxury haul from last year looked very different. In 2023, foreign brands such as Porsche, Bentley, Lamborghini, Rolls-Royce, and Lotus had glamorous displays there. This year, the same space hosted by Chinese marques like Xiaomi, Hongqi, GAC Honda, and CATL. Imports of ultra-luxury cars have been falling sharply since 2023. In July this year, sales of imported luxury cars in China totaled 170,000 units, a 20% year-on-year drop and nearly 30% lower than June. Consumers, however, hardly seem surprised. With Chinese EVs delivering blistering performance, Xiaomi SU7 Ultra, for example, matches Lamborghini and Ferrari in 0 to 100 km/h acceleration and increasingly refined interiors. Foreign cars have lost much of their appeal. Finally, a sneak peek into Chinese classroom as the new school year begins. September 1st marks the start of new school year, and students in Hangzhou, home to fast-rising tech companies like DeepSeek and Unitree Robotics, found something new on their timetables: artificial intelligence classes. Under new guiding rules, primary and secondary students will receive at least 10 hours of AI education each year. The guidelines are detailed. In early primary school, classes focus on responsible AI use and privacy. Later, students learn AI concepts from decision trees to neural networks. By middle school, the curriculum covers the full AI workflow, data preparation, model training, interference, while addressing real-world challenges. In high school, students engage in project-based work, designing AI systems and developing intelligent agents to apply the technology in daily life. The move fits into a broader national push. In December 2024, the Ministry of Education called on schools to expand AI education, and in May this year, it issued 2 guidelines to ensure age-appropriate use. Guangdong Province, for example, has already mandated a minimum of 6 hours of AI classes annually starting from primary school. And that's all for today, and thank you for watching this episode of China Currents. If you have any thoughts or comments, please leave them below, and see you next time.
Next on the show is the Thinkers Forum, and we are bringing you a special feature. Have you ever wondered where Chinese people spend their money and just how much they spend? Now, a new research report on Chinese consumption has the answers. Stay with us for the details.
If you follow China's economy, you've probably heard about the extent of Chinese people's frugality. When looking at per capita consumption, expenditure, and consumption, the money Chinese people spend each year is less than 1/10 of what Americans spend. Even compared with Mexicans, who have a similar per capita GDP to the Chinese still spend only about half as much. But are Chinese people really that stingy? Or perhaps these economic indicators themselves are misleading? Recently, 2 Chinese economists, Yu Fei and Guo Kai, published a paper that used physical consumption volumes, meaning the amount of tangible products consumed, to assess China's actual consumption level. Mexico, Japan, the United States, France, and Germany were chosen as peer groups. Mexico for its similar per capita GDP, Japan for its cultural proximity, and France and Germany as representatives of advanced economies. The results are quite eye-opening. They suggest that Chinese consumption has been significantly underestimated. They compared physical consumption volumes across 4 categories: food, manufactured goods, housing, and services, and found that China has already surpassed developed countries in multiple indicators. Even in areas where China still lags, the gap with these 5 countries is far smaller than the gap in per capita GDP. Specifically, in terms of food consumption, the authors examined per capita calorie supply between 1961 and 2021. China's upward trajectory is the steepest. Around 2003, it surpassed Japan. In 2013, it overtook Mexico, and by 2022, it had caught up with France and Germany, reaching 90% of the US level. Not only is calorie intake sufficient, but Chinese diets are also highly nutritious. Comparing per capita protein supply over the past 60 years, the data for China shows rapid growth. By 2021, China's per capita protein intake had reached 125.9 grams per day, the highest among the 6 countries. Next, the authors turned to manufactured goods, including clothing, footwear, household appliances, electronics, and automobiles. On clothing, Chinese people buy about 22 items per year, roughly the same as Mexicans. The figure is 37 for Japan, 43 for France, 55 for Germany, and 90 for the United States. On footwear, Chinese people purchase about 2 pairs per person annually. Similar to Japan and Mexico, France and Germany average 3 to 3.5 pairs, while American buys 5.6 pairs, with some statistics show as many as 8. In large household appliances, the gap narrows further. In some cases, due to climate and lifestyle differences, China even surpassed some developed nations. For example, in air conditioners, China leads with 31 units per 1,000 people, compared with 8 in Mexico, 13 in France, and 26 in the United States, while Japan tops the list with 78 units. Electronics is a category where the sharpest difference are observed. For example, in laptops, China had 10 units per 1,000 people in 2024, behind Mexico's 15 and far below the US, France, and Japan, Germany. For television and tablets, China lags significantly behind the other countries. Finally, in automobiles, while still lagging behind advanced economies, China is catching up quickly. Per capita car purchases rose from 18 per 1,000 people in 2019 to 22 in 2024, already higher than Mexico, but still below the US, Germany, Japan, and France. The authors conclude that Chinese consumption of manufactured goods is broadly comparable to that of peer economies and only significantly below advanced country levels. The third part of the study compared housing situation. Look at per capita living space and number of housing units per 1,000 people. Here again, the disparities are small. China averages 387 housing units per 1,000 people, compared with 591 in France, at 1.3 times that number in Japan and 1.1 times in the US. Mexico trails China with 278. Per capita living space in China is 38.8 square meters, compared with 39.6 in Mexico, 45.8 in Japan, 53.6 in Germany, and 58.8 in France, and 62.9 in the US, only 1.2 to 1.6 times China's level. Finally, the study turned to services, measured by expected years of schooling, life expectancy, and frequency of travel. In education, China has made rapid progress since the expansion of compulsory and higher education in the 1990s. Average expected years of schooling rose from 8.6 in 1990 to 15.2 in 2011. By 2010, China had caught up with Mexico. By 2022, it matched Japan, with less than a 1-year gap with France and US and less than 2 years with Germany. In life expectancy, the improvement is even more dramatic. From 53 years in 1965 to 78 in 2023, before 2004, China's life expectancy was roughly the same as Mexico's. By 2020, it has surpassed the US, with the gap with Japan, France, and Germany continuing to shrink. In tourism, domestic travel rose steadily, peaking at 4.2 trips per person in 2019, exceeding France and approaching Japan. International travel was lower, at 0.11 trips per person in 2019, compared with Japan, the US, Mexico, and France. In summary, China's service consumption suggests the residents' spending on education and healthcare already delivers outcome comparable to developed countries. Tourism lacks somewhat, but the gap is far smaller than implied by per capita spending. To conclude, the paper includes a comparative table that shows China's physical consumption relative to the other countries. Red font marks categories where China has overtaken others. Yellow highlights where China's gap is smaller than its GDP gap. Returning to the original question, are Chinese people really unwilling to spend? The answer largely depends on measurement. But regardless of how it is calculated, China's hundreds of billions of dollars in annual trade surpluses are a reality. As the authors note, if China's economic model can shift from being investment and export-driven to more consumption-driven, it would not only improve citizens' welfare, but also help ease global trade imbalances.
Up next on the show, Mimi sits with Carlos Ron, Venezuela's Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs for North America and President of the Simon Bolivar Institute for Peace and Solidarity Among Peoples. Their conversation explores the evolving relationship between China and Venezuela and what it means for both nations in a changing global order. Stay with us for more details.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Roughly Chinese. I'm your host Mimi, and today I'm joined by a very special guest, Carlos Ron. Hi Carlos, nice to have you with us.
Great to be here.
Yes, we'd love to introduce you to our audience. If you'd like to give a brief introduction, that'd be awesome.
First of all, thank you again for this opportunity of being here. Like you said, my name is Carlos Ron. I am currently a researcher with Tricontinental Institute. But I had a long service with the Venezuelan Foreign Service. I was a diplomat for several years now. I had served as Deputy Minister for Foreign Relations to North America
And so I kind of wanted to start off this podcast by commemorating Hugo Chavez. It was his birthday a few days ago. And I just wanted to kind of talk about his legacy and talk about his relationship not only with China, but also with the rest of the world, with socialism. And I wanted to kind of start off with a quote that I looked up yesterday with his revolutionary wisdom. He said, "We have been manipulated to believe that the first man on the moon was the most important event of the 20th century. But no, much more important things happened, and one of the greatest events of the 20th century was the Chinese Revolution." And I just think that Chavez had such a strong and adamant viewpoint about anti-imperialism. It reflected in his policy and the way that he governed Venezuela. And how he commemorated the Chinese Revolution is very moving to us Chinese. So yeah, I mean, what would you say is the relationship between Venezuela and China, and how much of that is due to Hugo Chavez?
The relationship between China and Venezuela, I think, was really redefined by the presence of President Chavez. I think when he first came to power, he showed that he was a humanist, and he understood that the future of the world was not in competition or in tensions or antagonisms, but rather in how you could cooperate with other cultures. And I think he clearly saw that China was, set to a similar path, and a path that we wanted to approach. See, for many years, I mean, Venezuela and China had already had over 20 years of diplomatic relations, but it was really when President Chavez came that took a different turn, that we really began to know each other. There were more state visits, there were more exchanges, and President Chavez wasn't afraid to have these exchanges and to let the Venezuelan people know the Chinese people a little better. I mean, we've always had historic migrations. Of course, there's always been Chinese population in different parts of Latin America. Venezuela wasn't an exception. But there was a jump. And I think the jump was trying to see common ground on defense of multilateralism, of defense of peace, and on shared prosperity.
Absolutely. I mean, I have another quote that he said that completely aligns with everything you just mentioned, where he says that an emerging alliance between progressive Latin America and China would be a great wall against American hegemonism, which I think is utterly important and extremely relevant to this day. But I want to ask you first, before that can happen, what is currently the Latin American perspective on China? Because Western media obviously penetrates Latin America. It's very, very pervasive everywhere it goes. And I hope that many other countries will be able to achieve digital sovereignty, because that's very important. But as we know that Western media is such an obstacle, what is the current mindset or opinion about China and Venezuela at least, and then zooming out to Latin America?
Yes. Well, I think there's different perspectives. I think what you said is true. I mean, definitely the Western narrative is something that permeates a lot of Venezuelan culture, but also of Latin American culture in general. So for many years, the problem has been that the story of China has not been told by the Chinese, but rather by somebody else in the West analyzing what China is. And I think that the shift in the last 20 years or 25 years has been more towards how do we find ways to really know from the Chinese what China is, not from somebody else telling us the story, and how can we also make our story be heard by the Chinese directly. So I think it's an effort. I mean, obviously, trade relations have improved in all of the continent with China in the last couple of years, and I think that has brought things together. We still have a lot to do in people-to-people connection. We still have a lot to do in learning about each other's histories. But I think, for example, in Venezuela, there's a perception, I think a very positive perception of China. And I think specific things such as when we got hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, I mean, China sent a team of specialists, doctors, to Venezuela to help us in our response. And that's something that countries do because of solidarity. That's something that countries do trying to build bridges. And that's very important. And the Venezuelan people that are grateful, and they remember that. And so I think, and that's just one thing. I mean, we've had other types of cooperations in agriculture and construction, other areas of development. But that gesture, the worst moment when most of the West, Europe, the United States, because of their sanctions, they were blocking Venezuela from obtaining vaccines. You can compare the difference when you see China sending doctors trying to help, while the others are blocking you for buying medicine, for buying masks, for everything, trying to protect your people. So those things we really take into consideration.
I didn't even know that myself. And I think that is very moving because, like we said, the Western media is so pervasive and it penetrates these kind of ideas or these stereotypes about both sides, right? And the thing that did cut through that was an action, right? That China was able to bring doctors to Venezuela, because the whole time the US might be perpetuating this narrative that China's going to take over Latin America, blah, blah, blah. But then what is the US doing to Latin America themselves? And how has the US provided aid to Latin America as well, when during a pivotal crisis that the entire world was facing, China stepped up and brought doctors to Venezuela to help. So I think, like you said, a lot of it is grounded in people-to-people exchanges as well as actual action, instead of these narratives and these words and this media that the US is constantly churning out for Venezuela, for China, like just all these things gone wrong.
Well, the main thing here is that China sees Latin America as a partner.
Yeah.
The problem with the United States is that for over 200 years, it has seen Latin America as some sort of appendix,
Right.
as if they have some sort of right to our resources, to our countries, and that's very troublesome. When you see the exchanges, always under the neoliberal policies of the Washington Consensus, the United States always offered aid, but also at certain conditions, and those conditions very often deprive people of basic rights. Especially they would take out resources from the state, and that would lessen people's abilities to have quality education, healthcare, housing. All these problems just increased.
Yeah.
And we were sort of set in some debt trap. Many of the countries in Latin America, at the Tricontinent, we've done research not only on the debt trap for Latin America, but also for Africa, for other countries. Now, when you see the approach, for example, that China has had towards Latin America, it's not something conditioned. It's not something invasive as what you do with run your internal policies, but rather is how can we cooperate with each other for a win-win situation. And that has completely been a game changer for relations.
Yeah.
I think it's important that that people understand that having a relationship that is respectful of the national sovereignty, that is cooperation rather than competition or exploitation, really makes a difference in international relations.
Absolutely. I think because of the way that the US, has been acting throughout its entire history, but has almost exposed itself more and more and more because of things that are just completely unacceptable, namely one of the things being the genocide in Gaza. I think so many people across the world are really seeing US hegemony its ugliest. The mask has been taken off. And I think in the same way in China, historically within the Chinese Revolution, people have always known that US hegemony is a threat, but definitely during, periods of opening up, perspectives also, there was still a perspective looking up to the US and looking towards the US for different technological and, scientific leads, right? But I think also recently, China has been really interested in the global South as well. I think thanks to BRICS and thanks to, like I said, the way the US has been acting, China has been really opening its eyes and its heart. I'll speak for actually Chinese citizens, Chinese netizens, not the Chinese government. Chinese netizens have been really hungry and curious to learn about the global South. And so, like you said, where Venezuelans are wanting to know more about what's happening in China on the ground from Chinese people, I think the exact same is happening within China, where Chinese people want to know more about Venezuela through Venezuelan people, because also we don't get, if we do get infiltrated by the West with things about Venezuela, we know not to believe it. But right now, I would say the perspective on Venezuela and President Maduro, it's very positive. It's like this admiration that Maduro in Venezuela has been very adamant and determined to continue on a socialist path. That has been incredible. But also understanding that some of the economic sanctions really choke and strangle Venezuela and affect Venezuela, which doesn't allow Venezuela to thrive economically. So I think Chinese netizens really understand that context, but I'm hopeful that there's more people-to-people exchanges. I think that could help a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important, and I think it's going on. I mean, there's more people coming to do studies or courses here in China. I think at the end of 23. President Maduro came to China, signed a new strategic alliance, an all-weather strategic partnership with China, which is a very important step. It's one of the very few countries that has such a high-level relationship with China. So I'm looking forward to all the changes that can take place in both our societies from that exchange.
Yeah.
But I do see, more interest in China to understand better other countries of the global South. To understand dynamics and to realize the future of humanity really lies in the global South.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to talk more about that actually, that very powerful sentiment that you just made, where the future lies in the global South. And I think the future lies especially in this strong cooperation that we are hopefully embarking on. But as we said before, there's so many obstacles that we need to overcome to really believe that and to understand that. So I guess to all our friends in the Global South, what would you say, now that you've been to China, what would you say about a potential shared future together, one that's not hegemonic? What would you say to them about dispelling myths about each other and about China?
Well, I think first we would understand that China has done a remarkable transformation. I don't think in the history of the world there's been something as remarkable as alleviating poverty the way that China has done. And I think that China stands as an example, not something that has to be imitated, because everybody has their own particularities and their own conditions. But it is good to know that someone, a country or a people united to fight these problems, these challenges such as poverty, and we're able to achieve significant success. And it feels good to know that there is a socialist path towards development, towards the future. And the idea that maybe we can look into that and see how something like that could come out from our own initiative is inspiring. And I think that what's important for Latin America, for Africans, for other Asians, is to see China as a model, not to be imitated, but as a model to be a reference point, something that can be that can even inspire to promote your own transformations. Because we all have to. There's a lot of conditions and problems and challenges that are particular to us that we have to deal with.
Do you see that happening on the ground in Venezuela right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're building our own path of independence, of transformation. I think there's a lot of. We always look to China to see what China has done, to see how some of these things can be somehow adopted or adapted to Venezuelan reality. I think it has been important. I mean, we are people that are also very concerned about alleviating poverty, about transforming people's realities. I mean, the Bolivarian Revolution, came precisely in a moment where over 75% of Venezuela's population was under a state of poverty. And President Chavez did, an enormous contribution by changing the way we ran the country and reaffirming national sovereignty over resources and building regionalism and, multilateralism, all these things that help build, the country we have. Unfortunately, after President Chavez passed away, there was a decision by the enemies of Venezuela and the enemies of the Venezuelan Revolution to impose these attacks and these measures that have affected severely our economy. But I also think that Venezuela didn't give up. Venezuela, under the leadership of President Maduro, became a place where continued to bet on socialist path, on not adopting neoliberal policies, on trying to be creative I think that's probably one of the best lessons that we can learn from China. So China has always bet on creativity to promote development. So Venezuela is also trying to be creative in its own way and with its own resources and its own conditions, but also to find its own path to development.
Yes.
And we've been successful. I mean, even despite all the attacks that we have, I mean, right now the Venezuelan economy has improved in the last 2-3 years significantly, and we're on an optimist path. We know we're strengthening relationships of the communes, the relationships of people, popular organizations throughout the country, and I think that's a huge jump from a previous moment in Venezuelan history where there was no interest in strengthening the national forces.
I think that was all so incredibly said, and you pointed to so many important parts. And I really love what you said about how we're not just applying one thing and taking it to another place, right? And China has also never asked or even requested anyone to look towards China's, you should do it just like us. No, of course not. We also respect the sovereignty and the how somewhere has its unique conditions and needs to develop on its own terms, right? We're not going to be like the US and tell people how to do what. Exactly. And I think, like you said, Venezuela has its own material conditions and it faces these extreme challenges from the US and yet remains optimistic and continues to move forward on a creative path towards socialism. I think that is really important for people to know, because I would say that China and Venezuela are very misunderstood by a lot of people. So it's so important.
Well, actually, I would say the other way around. I think they're very well understood by people that don't want the model to, or independent models to be out there.
Right.
I think there are interests, specific interests, that want to prevent, this creativity, or they want to prevent this independence. They don't like the word sovereignty, dignity, because they know what it means. That means that we're departing from their formula. So they know very well what they're doing.
Yes, the ones who are trying to stop it or to make everyone else misunderstand us, they know exactly what they're doing and how it works. And they also know that it's effective, and that's why it really scares them, right? So I think with all that, I mean, you also said that Latin America is seen by the US as an appendix of Latin America, of the US, which is very apparent in the way that they act, the way that they move, even the way that they talk about Latin America. So I would ask you right now, like, what are some of the challenges that Venezuela faces today from the US and from US imperialism?
Well, I mean, there's still, this use of unilateral coercive measures. We call them sanctions for purposes of simplicity, but really they're not sanctions because they're illegal measures taken without the approval of the United Nations, without any backdrop of international law. So that continues to be, of course, a strong hit on the Venezuelan economy and on the possibility of development. Of more recent times, we've seen that, unfortunately, the political narratives and the political struggles within the United States have also taken a turn into demonizing Venezuelan migrants. Yes. And we have seen terrible actions. I mean, we just a couple of days ago, a group of Venezuelans was finally able to return to Venezuela due to, President Maduro's diplomatic agency. But, they had been taken to a prison in El Salvador without due process, alleging that they were members of a gang, just feeding into this massive hysteria that, inside the United States against migrants and against working class people, which is what they are. And it was very unfortunate because, these people were, we didn't know what was going to happen. These people suffered torture, suffered disturbing aggressions. And also there's currently, I believe it's 33 or 34 children that have been separated from their families. And these are children that all of Venezuelan society is asking for their return. So it's something very important that we denounce these type of aggressions. But Venezuela doesn't want, Venezuela has always been open to diplomacy. Yeah. And I think, one of the important aspects of relations with anybody around the world is always establishing a relationship of respect, mutual respect. If you have mutual respect, then you can talk about anything and you can solve differences, you can move forward. And I think that's the type of relations that we look for. I think that's also a point of unity with China, because in the last couple of years, I believe around 2020, a group of Friends of the United Nations Charter was formed. China is a member as well as Venezuela. And this is a group of about 20 countries that have said, we need to respect international law. We need to adhere once again to the principles, the founding principles of the United Nations. I mean, this is an important year. It's 80 years of the victory against fascism. It's the founding of the United Nations. We have to go back to understanding international relations under those terms, on the terms of cooperation, defending peace. And I think that's something both China, Venezuela, and hopefully, you mentioned BRICS.
Yes.
And I think, that those are the spaces of cooperation and of development that we should strive for.
Yeah. I think speaking of that, I mean, China, of course, also deals with challenges of its own imposed by the US. And so as we try to engage in these diplomatic relations with each other, with the global South, it is so hard when there's so many obstacles and so many pressures that surround us and encircle us. So recently in China, we have seen that the Philippines and Japan actually strengthened ties with the US in terms of exporting combat vessels. And that was, of course, very alarming for us in China, right? So the Philippines, their angle is about containing China in the South China Sea. And we see the Philippines and Japan, as they have historically, being used as these allies, as these, I guess, in a way, extensions of the US imperialist powers, just to encircle China, contain China, suffocate China in a lot of ways. And, as we are talking about China and Venezuelan similarities and how in similar ways we are also demonized and misunderstood because of the ways that we go about things, of our path towards socialism, would you say that parallels in Venezuela as well? Like, are other countries within Latin America also being used against Venezuela, or also used to encircle Venezuela in a way?
During the 26 years of the Bolivarian Revolution, there's always been tensions. I mean, right now we are fortunate that we have there's a better government in Colombia, which is our neighbor. But for a period of time, there were governments of Colombia that had decisively taken an aggressive stance against Venezuela. There is, for a period of time, there was the government of Bolsonaro in Brazil, which was very hostile to Venezuela and broke relations and harassed our diplomats. We have there's tensions, unfortunately, with our other neighbor, which is Guyana, over a very long border disagreement that that we believe in international law has taken a turn that shouldn't have, because it's taken Guyana has taken a unilateral path to decide the limitations of the region, partially because it's been helped or this has been promoted by oil companies that are interested in the resources that are there. So Venezuela, I would say overall, has always had some sort of tensions, and I think that's a result of the practice. That's a practice of imperialism.
Yeah.
Everywhere that you see a country that is somehow independent or that's trying to strive towards its own path, there's going to be some sort of tensions always created, or
Right.
if not created, increased, but also because you mentioned the war economy. I mean, we've done research at Trigon where we've seen that the expenses that are being taken in many of the military budgets. I mean, the United States doesn't reveal. It has the largest military expense in the world, and it still doesn't reveal exactly how much it does. But it's an overextension of more than 800 military bases around the whole world. It has basically a war economy that profits in conflict. Doesn't even profit about winning a specific war, but actually it's the profit that continues to feed on the machine. So that's something we have to be, I think, very careful. When these issues arise, when these tensions between countries arise, what's really behind them?
Exactly.
Is it an actual thing that actual issue that we have to look at, or are there economic interests behind it? Is it military expense, or is the military industry trying to benefit from this, or is there another geopolitical interest that is trying to put down a specific project or a specific national process that defies the Western criteria. I think we always must look at that always with certain suspicion.
Yeah, I mean, everything you said again, so important because, like you said, we have to see beyond, we have to see more. And what was just mentioned about that being an age-old tactic of the US, what they've done to China, they've done to Venezuela, they've done to Russia, they've done to North Korea. Like, they've just done it to so many places now. And I do believe that people are starting to connect those dots. I mean, what they're doing to Palestine right now, it's just an age-old formula that they keep regurgitating. And we have to ask why and how are they benefiting from this and what economy does it run on? So,
you said you said we've done a study on hyperimperialism,
Yes.
and we think this is a new phase of imperialism now, and it's a phase that's critical because the United States, in a sense, is the center of this imperialist policy, and it has lost certain controls that it used to have. It no longer has control over the world's natural resources because other countries have been able to reassert their control. It no longer has control over the financial sector, not completely. I mean, when you talk about BRICS, you hear about initiative about maybe a new currency, maybe new forms of trading between partners. So that they're losing that. Technology, look where we're at. China is a place that has been tremendous technological advances. So you have an imperialism that for several years now had felt that it was hegemonic and that had complete control, and now it sees that it's losing those control. So what happens then? The aggression becomes even more vicious. And so you see, a genocide of the level of Palestine. You see this constant tension now expresses itself in some sort of tariff war where you really don't understand what the logic is, but it's always, trying to manipulate, coerce by using trade. So all these are tactics of a desperate type of imperialism that knows it's, withering away because you have a different world that is emerging. You have a world of pluripolarity, like President Chavez used to say, where interests balance each other out. Cooperation can be a player. So that puts everything, the dominance that the United States used to have, into big risk.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you maybe on I don't know what you see happening in the future as we have seen the US regurgitate and continue its behavior as a pattern and develop these new ways of being aggressive and taking itself so far that it's just beyond comprehension for so many of us. And like I said before, exposing its ugly face that it has. What do you see a united Latin America? Do you see the possibility of a united global South even?
Well, to you, three things I see. First, I think that there's a lot of changes that are going to happen within the United States. I think that I am hopeful that inside the United States there's also a change of consciousness. I mean, while you see all these aggressions against the rest of the world increasing, you also see a lot of problems within the United States. I mean, skyrocketing poverty. You have all these other issues within, but also you have a different attitude in people, especially young people in the United States. Young people are no longer afraid of using the word socialism, for example, or they're not afraid of protesting a genocide in Gaza. And I think there was an impact that was very visible in the last election of not listening to the people protesting genocide. I think that also you mentioned the global South, and I think the global South has a different type of consciousness now. I think again, like structures like BRICS have helped see other possibilities and other types of connections. This is a struggle. This is not easy. I'm not going to say that it's all rosy and that it's all, said and done. I think we still have to build better relationships between countries of the global South, but at least there's more political will in different governments, and this is also provoked by the push of popular organizations, social movements, within these countries that have helped see the global South different. And Latin America, well, again, it's a struggle because U.S. imperialism has always been an obstruction. But in the end, I think unity is a must for all of us. I mean, when you see China's development, you realize that China is very diverse. It's a huge territory. It has very diverse populations, but they were able to find common ground together.
Yes.
I mean, we have a similar path, I think, in Latin America. Next year, 2026, is the 200-year anniversary of the Panama Congress. And the Panama Congress, I think, we shouldn't see it as just as a historical reference. I think the process that began in Panama with the leadership of Simón Bolívar, trying to create a single nation and a unity of republics from the decolonized Latin America, South America, was very important because it was a way to create that unity that would really push for development. And what we see 200 years later is still that we have a lot of challenges of uniting. We have to overcome barriers. We have to overcome also the attitudes of each staying or trying to maintain its own small portion of the region and not seeing how we can build bridges.
Yeah.
I think in the last 25 years there have been strides. We have created new infrastructure organizations, multilateral organizations like CELAC, ALBA, which is perhaps is the best example of what can go right. I mean, in ALBA, which today is only 10 countries of the region, but ALBA was able in this very early stage to at least eradicate literacy from 4 countries by cooperation, mutual cooperation, to address important health challenges. So I think regionalism, we're at a point where regionalism is important. As we face the challenges of the world, climate change, the challenge that is brought on now by new technologies like artificial intelligence, it's regional unity what's really going to help us, face it together, help each other. So I think we're at that moment in time.
That's amazing. That really makes me feel like there is possibility of a bright future. And I really hope the same for Asia. I think the situation is very, very similar here.
And that brings us to the end of this edition of China Now. It's always a pleasure coming your way with the show, and we hope it continues to give you new insights into China, its perspectives, its culture, and its way of thinking. Would love to hear from you, so please share your comments, your thoughts, and feedback through the emails provided below. My name is Makiza Latifa, and I'll see you again, same time, next week. Do enjoy the rest of our programs and have a lovely weekend.